2nd and 3rd centuries were marked by a significant tension between the continuing presence of spiritual gifts, charismata, in the Orthodox Church, and the rise of radical charismatic movements, most notably Montanism. While the Church Fathers generally affirmed that the Holy Spirit remained active through various gifts, they developed strict criteria to distinguish true prophecy from the spurious ecstasies of rival groups. The persistence of Orthodox charismata. Throughout the 2nd and 3rd centuries, Orthodox writers consistently testified that spiritual gifts were not extinct. Ongoing gifts. Eusebius and Irenaeus affirmed that wonderful powers of divine grace were still being exhibited in many churches during their time. Justin Martyr claimed that the prophetical gifts once belonging to the Jewish nation had been transferred to Christians' types of manifestations. Irenaeus noted that disciples performed miracles to promote the welfare of others, including driving out devils, seeing visions, uttering prophetic expressions, and healing the sick by the laying on of hands. Origen also maintained that traces of the Holy Spirit remained among Christians, such as the expulsion of demons and the foretelling of future events according to the will of the Word. The manner of prophecy. Hippolytus described the prophets as being moved by the Word, like instruments of music, to announce what God willed. Origen added that the angel of the prophetic spirit would fill a person in an assembly of righteous men, and they would speak to the multitude as the Lord wished. The Montanist movement, the new prophecy. The most prominent charismatic movement was Montanism, originating in Ardaba, Phrygia, around the mid-2nd century. Founders and spirit. The movement was led by Montanus, who was allegedly seized by a frenzy and ecstasy, and began to speak in a manner contrary to church custom. He was joined by 2 women, Priscilla and Maximilla, who also spoke in frenzied ecstasies. Claims to superiority. The Phrygians claimed that the Paraclete, the Holy Spirit, spoke through their prophets, often asserting that these new revelations were superior to the teachings of the apostles or the Gospels. Rigorism and discipline. They introduced novelties of fasts and feasts and meals of parched food. Tertullian, who later joined the movement, defended these practices as a necessary final bridle upon the flesh to lead the church into all truth. Criteria for discernment. The church developed specific tests to differentiate between the divine spirit and earthly spirits. Behavioral tests. The shepherd of Hermas provided a definitive guide. A true prophet is characterized by meekness, humility, and a refusal to take rewards for prophecy. In contrast, a false prophet exalts himself, is talkative, lives in luxury, and only prophesies in secret corners for money. Nature of ecstasy. A primary point of contention was the state of the speaker. Orthodox writers argued that true prophets remained in control of their will and did not experience alienation of mind. Conversely, the false prophet was said to fall into a spurious ecstasy, accompanied by a want of all shame and fear. Ecclesiastical approval. Any prophesying that reviled the Church universal under heaven or sought to create schisms was rejected as heretical, radical, and magical variations beyond Montanism. Other movements used charismatic claims for different purposes. Marcosians. Led by Marcus, this group used sleight of hand and demons to simulate miracles, such as making the wine in a Eucharistic cup appear purple or red. They used lots to determine who would prophesy during their feasts. Elkosites. This sect possessed a volume allegedly revealed by a 96-mile-high angel. They practiced a second baptism for the remission of even the gravest sins and used incantations for healing Simonians. The followers of Simon Magus were accused of practicing magic, using dream senders, and maintaining images of Simon and Helena for worship. How do they resemble or differ from the modern charismatic movement? The 2nd and 3rd century charismatic movements, particularly Montanism, also known as the Phrygian heresy, were a significant challenge to the early church. While the ancient sources do not explicitly detail a parallel to the modern charismatic movement, there are clear similarities and also distinctions regarding the role of spiritual gifts, ecclesiastical authority, and the nature of revelation. Resemblances to the charismatic movement. Based on descriptions of Montanism and the broader early church context, there are several points of resemblance to modern charismatic practices. Focus on the Holy Spirit, the Paraclete. Like modern movements, Montanism emphasized a direct, ongoing relationship with the Holy Spirit. They believed the Spirit continued to provide specific guidance for the Church's life and discipline. Ecstatic manifestations. The movement was characterized by frenzy and ecstasy. Leaders like Montanus, Priscilla, and Maximilla were described as speaking in strange things and spurious utterances that bypassed ordinary custom-active role of women. The movement was notably shaped by two women, Priscilla and Maximilla, who were regarded as prophetesses. Tension with hierarchy. The new prophecy created friction with the established ecclesiastical order. The sources note that Montanists were often expelled from the church and debarred from communion because their utterances were not recognized by the universal church. Key differences from the charismatic movement. The sources highlight several areas where Montanism and the early church's reaction to it differ from many modern charismatic frameworks. Ascetic rigorism. A primary hallmark of Montanism was extreme legalism and asceticism. They introduced novelties of fasts and feasts and meals of parched food, and strictly prohibited second marriages, viewing them as a form of Montanus. Claim to superior revelation. Unlike many modern charismatics who view their gifts as restoring apostolic practice, the Montanists claim to have learned something more through these prophets than from law and prophets and the Gospels. They even presume to assert that their prophets possessed something superior to Christ. The frenzy as a negative marker. In the 2nd century, frenzy, ecstasis, was often used as a negative criterion. The Orthodox Church argued that a true prophet should be meek and peaceable and humble, and speak only when God willed, whereas the false prophet was bold and impudent and talkative, speaking in a spurious ecstasy. The Church's stance and criteria for discernment. The early Church developed specific tests to distinguish true spiritual gifts from the seductive spirit of the Phrygians. Behavioral testing. According to the Shepherd of Hermas, a true prophet is characterized by humility and a lack of desire for rewards, while a false prophet takes rewards for his prophecy and lives in the midst of many luxuries. The rule of faith. The Church insisted that any genuine manifestation of the Spirit must align with the rule of faith and the custom of the Church handed down from early times. Tertullian, even during his own shift toward Montanism, admitted that the Paraclete would not adulterate the rule of faith. Apostolic succession. The sources emphasize that all doctrine which agrees with the apostolic churches must be reckoned for truth. The Church rejected the Montanists because their new prophecy reviled the Church universal under heaven and lacked apostolic credentials. In summary, while the early movements and modern charismatics share an emphasis on the Holy Spirit's immediate presence, the Montanist movement was uniquely defined by its extreme asceticism and its claim to surpass the authority of the apostles.